Hey guys, it's Lisa and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to start my first fall video, and I know this is very early, but I mentioned before that I need to get some of these made up ahead, and I'm going to start with things like bowl fillers. And obviously this is not going to be a bowl filler, but it's kind of similar. So I'm going to make some little pies that you can set out during fall and even through Christmas. And I'm going to start out with these little pie plates. And I don't like that these are aluminum colored, so I'll be painting these. And I paint them brown and then sprinkle some cinnamon over them. And then they look like rusted pie plates. So that's how I do those. And then after the cinnamon, or after the paint dries, then I put a clear coat over the cinnamon, and that's how I get those pie plates ready. But right now I'm just kind of showing you what you do with these before I actually paint the plate. So this is the fabric Warm and Natural, and if you don't have any Warm and Natural, this is a wonderful fabric to have, especially during the holidays, because there are so many projects that you can do with these, and if you've watched me long, you know that I use this a lot. So I get this in the quilt batting section. It is a type of quilt batting. So it comes in a bag, and it's called Warm and Natural. And what I do is I just make a strong pot of coffee, and then I just kind of soak this in it until it accepts the liquid into it. And then once it's all covered completely, then I just kind of wring it out and hang it outside to dry. And now here I'm cutting a strip, and I guess this is maybe about 1 inch wide. But this is what I'm going to use to make my crust around the sides. So I think one of these, the length of this fabric will do around this. But anyway, so I am going to put just a little bit of polyfill down in the bottom of the pie plate. And you don't want to stuff it much. You just want enough to where when you put that fabric over the top, it's not just completely flat. These are so much fun to make, and you can make different types of pies. And I'm even going to make a larger pie in this video. So I just take something and trace around the top of the pie plate, and then I cut that out. Now ideally, and what we did later was cut my shapes out first. I cut the 1 inch strips out, and also cut several of these circles out, and then coffee stain them, because what that does is you're going to get more of the coffee staining around the edge, where here I have to take some antiquing ink and go around the edges so that it doesn't look freshly cut, if that makes sense. So ideally, cut these ahead of time. So now that I put my fiber fill or polyfill in the bottom, then I'm just gonna glue this to the top. But before I do that, if you notice with most pies, they will cut some venting holes. So I'm just cutting 4 little slits around the edge, and I'm sorry that I'm out of frame here. You'll see how I cut those, but I just cut 4 little slits just for venting, so that like when you bake the pie, you cut those little slits in it. So that's going to make it look more realistic. And it's also going to show some of the insides of the pie, which will make it look more realistic. But as you can see there, I just cut 4 slits around the edges. Now this was my first attempt at these pies, and although they are super simple, right away I learned that there were easier ways. So one of the things that I learned on this, here I'm gluing this down over the polyfill. Well, the best thing to do, I learned, was to put some blue fabric underneath between the polyfill and the what is going to serve as the pie crust, which is the warm and natural. And the reason for that is that way you can see, because you're going to see into that slit, you're going to see blue and not that polyfill. So what I did to remedy that one on this one is I'm going to be adding some berries to this. So I took some air dry clay that is the foam based. It dries much lighter weight. And I just rolled it up and made some little berries, and I wasn't worried about the shape of them. I just got them as round as I could without much trouble, and just made a whole bunch of little berries. And then I put them in a little sandwich bag and put some drips of paint in it, and just kind of rolled them around. And as you can see, some white shows, but that's fine, because to me that just makes it look more realistic. And when I let them dry, some of them stuck together, and that's fine too, because it just makes a little cluster of berries. But I'm just taking some hot glue and just kind of pressing them down into that slit. And it's good to let some of them kind of come up above that here and there. And it just looks like that it's baked, and they're kind of popping up out of the top. But again, if I had put the blue fabric down, I wouldn't have to be quite as careful putting these down in. And so again, that's what I learned on this one. And on the next one that I did, I used some blue fabric. As a matter of fact, I just used some blue gingham with a little bit of other color in it, and it was just the primary color was blue, and that was enough. I just needed the illusion of the blue down inside it. So so that makes my little pie here. And now I take that strip, and I'm just going to kind of pleat it all the way around. Again, I learned on this one. So what I did with this one is I made all my pleats, and then I went back and glued those little pleats down, if that makes sense. So that was a little bit of extra trouble, and it was a little bit different look than what I ended up doing. Now, you could actually even add a hanger to these and use them as a tree ornament. I have a friend who does her tree in baked goods, and so this would be great for her tree. But I'm doing this with the idea of just kind of setting them out to decorate for the holidays. And you could even, instead of using the polyfill inside these, you could use a potpourri with the smell of whatever the pie was. So if you did an apple pie, then obviously you could do an apple flavored or scented potpourri. But I'm not going to do that with mine. You could also spray some essential oil on it in that aroma. So there's lots that you could do with these. Now I've seen these made with a clay or even a salt dough, but to me, this warm and natural. Now, what I saw on Pinterest, they were actually done with muslin fabric, but I felt like this warm and natural would look more realistic and have more of a primitive look. So it was amazing how much it looks like a pie. So as you can see here, I pleated these around the edge, and then again I go back and glue those pleats down. Well, what I found was that instead of making that precise pleat like I did, if you could just go around and glue it maybe an inch or two around and then just kind of pinch it together, then it looks more like a pie crust, and it's a lot easier. Then you don't have to go back and glue those pleats down like I'm doing there. But again, you just kind of learn as you go, and this was my first try, and I still was very happy with how this one turned out. And this is not even the finished product. There's some other steps that I'm going to do to it to make it look even more realistic. Now this little pie I'm probably going to sell for $5 or $6. Again, I have not made these before, so I'm not certain what I'm going to ask for them. But my larger pies that I'll be making, I'm going to put 10 on probably. And if you wanted, you could put some hang tags on these, and that would be really cute with some hang tags. Again, I'm not going to do that because what I want to do is put several of these in a container, and I'll put a little sign that says pies and, you know, what the price is for the small and the large. Now I'm putting the glossy Mod Podge on this, and I want to give it more of a, like the sugared top finish, so I need that glossy finish. Now you could use glue, but I don't know if that would be a glossy enough look for me. These are going to be very primitive, so they don't have to look glossy, but I just I like the look that I got from this. So I put a pretty thick coat of the glossy finish Mod Podge all over the top of this. And then once I got that covered, I sprinkled some cinnamon over the top and some kosher salt because I wanted that thick, that dense salt, I guess, rather than the fine. And on this first one, I did put a little bit of glitter on the top of this, and I just did that opalescent glitter. But I decided on the other ones that all I wanted on them was that kosher salt and the cinnamon. Now these are some more of those berries, and I just glued some with hot glue to the top of this. So now I'm going to do a larger one. Again, I went back and painted these pie plates on the bottom, and I should have painted them first, but I wanted to get this video finished, so I just went ahead and made the pies, and then once they dried well, I turned them over and did the painting. Again, I just painted them brown and sprinkled some cinnamon over them, and then sprayed them with a polyacrylic spray. Now this is the same technique. Obviously you're going to need a little bit more polyfill. You still don't need much. And then you need a larger piece of the Warm and Natural. Again, I get so many questions about where to get this, and most of the time Walmart will have it in the quilt batting section. Because again, it is a type of quilt batting. Now here I am cutting those slits in these. Now some of them I cut 4 slits in them, and some I did 6 slits. I think I just did 4 on this one. Now I got a little smarter on this one and put some red fabric underneath it. So I didn't have red fabric wide enough to go over this, but that wasn't a problem at all because I'm just going to use 2 pieces, and they don't need to be neat at all. They just need to cover that polyfill up. And again, it doesn't need to be solid red. It just needs to have a lot of red in it. I know that the inside of this is very messy, but it doesn't matter because it's going to be completely covered. We just want that red to show through underneath. And once I get it glued and covered, then I'll just do the same thing and add that Warm and Natural over the top. So I'm just cutting away that excess before I add the Warm and Natural. Now these go really, really quickly if you do them kind of in an assembly line. If you paint all your pie plates first and then fill them all with the polyfill, and then decide which ones you want, what flavors you want, and just do each step at a time, and it would go much, much quicker. It didn't take very long at all to make these. And I guess the hardest part was making those berries, and it wasn't hard at all. It was just a little more time consuming. So you just take a tiny little pea-size amount of that foam clay, and I get mine at Walmart, and just roll it around in your hand and let it dry. Now, when you're letting it dry, I sprinkle just a little bit of cornstarch over them, and then you have less of them sticking together because it's a very, very lightweight clay, so they kind of roll around and stick together. So that's the hardest part. And, of course, painting those, which is very easy when you put them in a sandwich bag and just put a few drops of paint and just kind of keep rolling them around. Once they're dry, once the clay has set up, just roll them around until you get them covered. Or you could do the easy way and just buy some faux berries. Now, some of my Warm and Natural stain darker than others, and that's how it's going to do, and that's okay because this just looks like uncooked pie dough, or not quite as cooked. And you can add antique ink with your antique ink if you want. But I found in doing these that once you add your cinnamon, you get a lot darker finish anyway. So, but I wouldn't start with just undyed because I just don't think that would look realistic enough. But as you can see here, I learned to do that crust a different way, and it was so much quicker, and I actually like the look of it better. So I just kind of put on there and just kind of squished it together, for lack of a better term, and it looked much more like pie crust. And that's what you do a lot of times when you crimp the edges of a pie. So it just worked much better. It went a lot quicker, and I felt like it looked a little more realistic. So once I went all the way around on this one, again, I felt like it needed to be a little bit darker. So when I took my antiquing ink around the edges where I cut my fabric after I had done my coffee staining, I just added a little extra antiquing to the rest of it as well. Now, I have a lot of people ask about this ink. This is a Tim Holtz antiquing ink, and you can get it at Joann's, at Hobby Lobby. I get mine from Amazon a lot of times. It's very available. It's very easy to find. So, and this is just a little ink blending tool that you can also order from Amazon. And it comes with a lot of pads to go on the end of it. And I use this for paper, cloth. I use it for so many things. Now, this ink is not, if you don't seal it, it doesn't stay put well on a slicker surface. But obviously, on this cloth, it's going to be just fine. And there's different shades of this. I think I'm using Actually, I think this is antique linen, I think is the color that I'm using here. But you could use any shade that you want that is a browner shade. You may or may not need as much depending on how dark your antiquing ink is. So now I'm going to add some cherries to the inside of this, and remember I have that cloth underneath it, so I don't have to worry about making sure that all of that polyfill is covered. I'm just going to stick a few berries in each of these holes, and it will work out just fine. Now, another thing that I learned to add to these is a lot of times when you're baking your pies, actually most of the times, you're going to get some of that liquid to kind of bubble out of your little slits, and also some around the edges of the pie crust. So what I did was I took some of this same Mod Podge, the glossy Mod Podge, and I put some drops of red paint in it, and I made a red syrup. And so, and then I just I took my bottle that I mixed it in, and I just kind of squeezed a little into those little holes, and it got some on the cloth there around it, which made it more realistic. And then again, I also squeezed some around the edges in places where a lot of times you don't get your pie sealed as well as you would like to. And I just mixed this in a little glue bottle. But I just squeezed it down in there, and again I purposely let some get on the fabric so that it looked more realistic. Now when you first squeeze it on there, it has more of a pink look because you have that white Mod Podge, and it mixes with the red so it looks pink, but you know that that's going to dry clear, so then it's going to be red. So each little step that you do with these just makes it look more and more realistic. And these are so fun to do. And because we were making several of these today, we just kind of wanted to get in the mood for it. So we put some candle scents in the burner that had the smells of these pies. And it just kind of put us in that festive mood, and it was just a fun day working on these. So I'm going to put the berries in the center, so rather than to put glue there, I just decided to put a little puddle of this syrup, and that will make it look even more realistic. And now, because I haven't waited on this to dry yet, I'm going to put some Mod Podge over the top, but I have to be careful not to get it into that red syrup so that I don't get it all over my pie. And if I get a little bit, which I do get a little bit, then that's not a big deal because a lot of times you'll get a little on your pie crust anyway. So these are almost foolproof. They're just so fun to make. So I just go all over this with the Mod Podge. And again, I'm going to sprinkle that kosher salt on it and sprinkle some cinnamon on. Now on this cherry one, I was a little more careful with the cinnamon. I didn't want quite as much cinnamon on this one. I know you're not going to have any cinnamon on it. It's just I feel like that cinnamon gives it a better look. I only made a few of these larger pies. I just felt like I wanted to have some that were setting around. Now here's what they look like when I painted them brown and put the cinnamon on them. But now I'm going to do an apple pie. And this one was a little bit more difficult trying to decide how to do it. Because I wasn't sure what to put on the top of it to make it obvious that it was an apple pie. Now, I could have done a lattice pie, and that's very doable. And I did a small one that I didn't include in this video of a blueberry one. And it worked out really well, but it's just more time consuming. And so you're going to have to ask more money for those. So I just decided I liked the other ones just as well, but you do need something on top to embellish it to make it more obvious that it is an apple pie. So that's a little bit more difficult. Now, as you can see in drying that, I got a little white streak on the other side, so I don't want that. So I'm using the other side of the Warm and Natural, which was fine. And I think on this one I cut 6 slits rather than 1. And I didn't get them perfect, which is fine because it's just a pie crust, so it's never perfect. And the fabric that I used on the inside of this one, so that the polyfill didn't show, was just some burlap because I felt like that was kind of a caramel color. And again, I'm just going for just close to that look. And then I glued my Warm and Natural on, and I did my crust around the edge the same way. Now for the filling on this one, what I did was just took some of this fabric, and I took some that wasn't coffee stained. You could use some that was also. I cut them in little pieces, and then I made some caramel sauce just using some of that Mod Podge and some drops of the color Pine Cone, which is a Dixie Belle color, and it made a good color for the caramel sauce. So then I just took those little bitty bits of fabric that I had cut up, and I just kind of put them in that syrup, and I didn't worry about getting them completely covered because I wanted that white to show through in places so that it looked like little cut up pieces of apple. So then I just kind of stuffed that in and let some of it kind of show through those slits, and then and that made it look more like apples. It still needed more though. So what I did was I cut some circles, and you can see those to the right here of my bottle. I just cut some circles out of this same Warm and Natural fabric, and I glued them together so that they formed a wedge. I didn't worry with stuffing them. I just glued them together, and I made sure that I got a really tight glue so that the edge looked more finished. Now here I am taking that same homemade caramel sauce and just kind of squirting it down in that area so it looks like the juices are kind of coming out again. It's going to get some on the fabric, which is great. So again, all these little touches add to that, and you can see how imperfect I got my little slits there, but again, that's fine. And here I am squeezing some of this stuff around the edges so that it looks like it kind of came through the pie crust, which is a lot of times what you'll get. Then I put some in the center and put those apples on top of it. And that was the only embellishment that I could think of to make these look like they were apple pies more. And if you guys have any ideas, I'd love to hear them. That's all that I could come up with. I know that a lot of times they'll take the pie crust and cut a little leaf shape or something out and put on the top. But again, I just didn't know how to make this look like it was actual apples. So now here I am putting that Mod Podge over this, and I'll sprinkle it with the kosher salt and cinnamon, and I put more cinnamon on this one than some of the others. As you can see, these are very simple to make, and there's not much material in them, so you're not going to have much cost in your material. And again, I don't think that they took very much time, especially if you're making several at once. Now also, we also made some turnovers, and those are these here in this basket. I'm going to do those in another video. Those are also very simple to do, and those actually make very good bowl fillers. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great evening, and God bless you and your family.